Mantras of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says at certain periods the whole terrestrial life seems to pass miraculously through stages which at other times it would take thousands of years to traverse. With my love and blessings, says our Divine Mother. Words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo from the book Essays on Gita. Topic: The Message of the Gita, Chapter 24, page 553. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the secret of action, so we might summarize the message of the Gita, the word of its divine teacher, is one with the secret of all life and existence. Existence is not merely a machinery of nature, a wheel of law in which the soul is entangled for a moment or for ages. It is a constant manifestation of the Spirit. Life is not for the sake of life alone, but for God, and the living soul of man is an eternal portion of the Godhead. Action is for self-finding, for self-fulfillment, for self-realization, and not only for its own external and apparent fruits of the moment or the future. There is an inner law and meaning of all things dependent on the Supreme as well as the manifested nature of the Self. The true truth of the work lies there and can be represented only incidentally, imperfectly, and disguised by ignorance in the outer appearances of the mind and its action. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the supreme, the faultless, largest law of action is therefore to find out the truth of our own highest and inmost existence and live in it, and not to follow any outward standard and dharma. All life and action must be till an imperfection, a difficulty, a struggle, and a problem. It is only by discovering your true self, and living according to its true truth and its real reality that the problem can be finally solved, the difficulty and struggle overpassed, and your doings perfected in the security of the discovered self and spirit turn into a divinely authentic action. Know then yourself, know your true self to be God and one with the self of all others. Know your soul to be a portion of God. Live in what you know, live in the self, live in your supreme spiritual nature, be united with God and Godlike. Offer first all your actions as a sacrifice to the highest and the one in you, and to the highest and the one in the world. Deliver last all you are and do into His hands for the Supreme and Universal Spirit to do through you His own will and works in the world. This is the solution that I present to you, and in the end you will find that there is no other. Our Lord says here it is necessary to state the Gita's view of the fundamental opposition on which, like all Indian teaching, it takes its position. This finding of the true self, this knowledge of the Godhead within us and all is not an easy thing. Nor is it an easy thing either to turn this knowledge, even though seen by the mind, into the stuff of our consciousness and the whole condition of our action. All action is determined by the effective state of our being, and the effective state of our being is determined by the state of our constant self-seeing will and active consciousness, and by its basis of the kinetic moment. It is what we see and believe with our whole active nature ourselves to be, and our relations with the world to mean. It is our faith, our Shraddha, that makes us what we are. But the consciousness of man is of a double kind and corresponds to the double truth of existence. For there is a truth of inner reality and a truth of the outer appearance. According as he lives in one or the other, he will be a mind dwelling in human ignorance or a soul founded in divine knowledge. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, in its outer appearance, the truth of existence is solely what we call nature or prakriti, a force that operates as the whole law and mechanism of being, creates the world which is the object of our mind and senses, and creates too the mind and senses as a means of relation between the creature and the objective world in which he lives. In this outer appearance, man in his soul, his mind, his life, his body, seems to be a creature of nature differentiated from others by a separation of his body, life, and mind, and especially by his ego sense. That subtle mechanism, constructed for him that he may confirm and centralize his consciousness of all the strong separateness and difference. All in him, his soul of mind and its action, as well as the functioning of his life and body, is very evidently determined by the law of his nature, cannot get outside of it, cannot operate otherwise. He attributes indeed a certain freedom to his personal will, the will of his ego, but that in reality amounts to nothing, since his ego is only a sense which makes him identify himself with the creation that nature has made of him, with the varying mind and life and body she has constructed. His ego is itself a product of her workings, and as is the nature of the ego, so will be the nature of its will, and according to that he must act, and he can no other. This then is man's ordinary consciousness of himself, this his faith in his own being, that he is a creature of nature, a separate ego establishing whatever relations with others and with the world, making whatever development of himself, satisfying whatever will, desire, idea of his mind may be permissible in her circle and consonant with her intention or law in his existence. There is, however, something in man's consciousness which does not fall in with the rigidity of this formula. He has a faith which grows greater as his soul develops in another and an inner reality of existence. In this inner reality, the truth of existence is no longer nature but soul and spirit, Purusha rather than the Prakriti. Nature herself is only a power of spirit, Prakriti, the force of the Purusha. A spirit, a self, a being, one in all, is the master of this world, which is only his partial manifestation. That spirit is the upholder of nature and her action and the giver of the sanction by which alone her law becomes imperative and her force and its ways operative. That spirit within her is the knower who illuminates her and makes her conscient in us. His is the immanent and superconscient will that inspires and motives her workings. The soul in man, a portion of the divinity, the soul in man, a portion of this divinity, shares his nature. Our nature is our soul's manifestation, operates by its sanction, and embodies its secret self knowledge and self consciousness and its will of being in her motions and forms and changes. The real soul and self of us is hidden from our intelligence by its ignorance of inner things, by a false identification, or by an absorption in our outward mechanism of life, mind, and body. But if the active soul of man can once draw back from this identification with its natural instruments, if it can see and live in the entire faith of its inner reality, then all is changed to it. Life and existence take on another appearance, action a different meaning and character. Our being then becomes no longer this little egoistic creation of nature, but the largeness of a divine, immortal, and spiritual power. Our consciousness becomes no longer that of this limited and struggling mental and vital creature, but an infinite, divine, and spiritual consciousness. And our will and action too are no longer that of this bounded personality and its ego, but a divine and spiritual will and action, the will and power of the universal, the supreme, the all self and spirit, acting freely through the human figure. This is the great chance and transfiguration runs the message of the Godhead in man. The avatar, the divine teacher, to which I call the elect, and the elect are all who can turn their will away from the ignorance of the natural instruments to the soul's deepest experience, its knowledge of the inner self and spirit, its contact with the Godhead, its power to enter into the divine. The elect are all who can accept this faith and this greater law. It is difficult indeed to accept for the human intellect, attached to always to its own cloud forms and half-lights of ignorance, and to the yet obscurer habits of man's mental, nervous, and physical parts. But Once received, it is a great and sure and saving way because it is identical with the true truth of man's being, and it is the authentic moment of his inmost and supreme nature. But the change is a very great one, an enormous transformation, and it cannot be done without an entire turning and conversion of your whole being and nature. There will be needed a complete consecration of yourself and nature and your life to the highest and to nothing else but to the highest. For all must be held only for the sake of the highest, nothing accepted except as it is in God and a form of God and for the sake of the divine. There will be needed an admission of a new truth, an entire turn and giving of your mind to a new knowledge of self and others and world and God and soul and nature. A knowledge of universal divinity, which will be at first an acceptance by the understanding, but must become in the end a vision, a consciousness, a permanent state of the soul and the frame of its moments. There will be needed a will